Hello and welcome to our Magicians Without Borders Conversations. Tonight we've got episode 11 where we're going to talk about a year-long adventure in Brazil for one of our volunteers. But before that, let's welcome, as always, our founder, Tom. How are you, Tom?
I'm great, Carlos. I love your enthusiasm. It's just infectious, as we say. So it's great to be here again. I'm sure we don't know exactly what we're going to talk about, but like magic, we'll pull it out of the hat.
We'll figure it out. Now that you said about enthusiasm, it reminded me of, I think I said this before in one of our episodes, when I got to see Jeff McBride do one of his live sessions of his Magic Mystery School on Mondays.
Monday night.
In his virtual school, he gets so hyped before the show. Before this class, it's infectious, as you say.
Yeah.
So pretty cool that we got that little
connection there.
That we can visit in the future, right in a couple of seconds, where we share something that's pretty cool that you have there for us, right?
Would you like me to share that now?
Do you want to share it now, or
Sure. I think I know what you're talking about. We had talked about it a while ago.
Share it. It's so cool.
I just received in the mail my renewed membership card in the Society of American Magicians. And speaking of Jeff McBride, this year they're honoring on their card Eugene Berger. And we were honored this year to receive the annual Eugene Berger Legacy Award. So the McBride Magic and Mystery School honors and recognizes Tom Verner and Magicians Without Borders with the Eugene Berger Legacy Award, signed by Jeff and Larry Haas. So that was really quite wonderful. I have loved Eugene and his contributions to magic, and he was a great admirer of Magicians Without Borders. And one of my absolute favorite books is The Meaning of Magic that he wrote with Bob Neal. And it's a wonderful book about the history of magic, and really he and Bob's great mission to teach magicians how to turn a trick into magic. And Eugene was brilliant at that. Anybody who knows his magic, like the way he does the gypsy thread, is just an elegant, gorgeous piece of poetic magic. So anyhow, I was thrilled that the Society of American Magicians was honoring Eugene this year. So
go and I mean, congrats on that recognition for you.
Yeah,
and all the years of work that you've put into this organization and social magic all around the world. It's way more than deserved. So,
well, thank you.
So cool.
Thank you.
It's
great.
Talking about this, take me back, Tom, to when you first got introduced into magic, or how did you get introduced into the world of magic?
It's amazing. We've had 11 conversations, or 10, and now this is the 11th one. And that, I don't think, has come up.
Nope. We're going to hear it for the first time. And I think most people are going to hear it for the first time.
And a lot of people, when they meet a magician, they say, how did you get into magic? You know, it's like one of the very, very first questions. Well, like a lot of 10-year-old boys, I got interested in magic, and I can't actually say what it was that got me into magic. But I remember I got a book, Dunninger, the American magician Dunninger. It was a big, like 8.5 by 11 paperback with wonderful illustrations in it, and it taught magic tricks. And for a couple of years, I learned magic from that book. I never did any shows or any birthday parties or any of those kind of things. It was just really for my own entertainment, and I would do magic shows, or not magic shows, but magic tricks for my family and some relatives and friends. But something wonderful happened. I was at International Brotherhood of Magicians, or an SAM convention, one year, and I was in the dealer's room, and there was a book dealer, a magic, a guy who was selling magic books. Had that book. He had an old copy of that Dunninger's Book of Magic. And it was some outrageous price. I think it was like $75 or something. But I picked it up and I started looking through it like you can with books you had as a child. And it really brought me back to that time, looking at those. I wasn't remembering. I was actually re-experiencing those moments when I was a child learning magic. But like a lot of kids, I didn't stay with it. I just did it. And then I went on and did college and ended up getting my degree in psychology and became a clinical psychologist. And I was working. It's really kind of a wonderful story. I was working in a drug and alcohol hospital and working with heroin addicts and alcoholics, but mostly people who were addicted to opiates. And one of the responsibilities I had was to spend one weekend a month at our residential treatment center. And there happened to be a magician at that treatment center he had lost everything. He was a professional magician, and he had lost his whole career and his props and everything. Life was in such chaos using heroin. So he would show me coin tricks, and I was amazed. And probably the French drop or something. I was totally amazed. And I begged him to teach me some magic. And he said, no. It's a secret. So about 3 months later, he got assigned to me as my patient. And I had to see him once a week for 1 hour of counseling, 60 minutes. So his name was Milton Nichols. And he came into the first counseling session. And he said, okay, Verner, 50 minutes are mine and 10 minutes are yours. And for the next 2 years, the last 10 minutes of our session was a magic lesson. And he said to me, he would teach me something like a coin pass or something. And he'd say, if you master this, if you practice it and do it really well, I'll show it to me next week. If you master it, I'll teach you something else. And he was very, very strict with me. And that was how it began. And actually, he and I ended up, he got all better, got over his addiction to heroin, got back into doing magic. And he and I started a magic shop together.
Oh, nice.
And I have here, wait a minute, somewhere. Where is it? Here on my bookshelf. Just a minute here. It was called The Magic Shop. And this was our original. He was a really good juggler.
Mm-hmm.
This was our original catalog. It was people who are listening to this probably don't even know what a mimeograph machine is. But this was our first catalog. And let's see if I can show you. There's Milton Nichols and Tom Verner. And this was our here's a page from there's Harry Houdini, and this was a page on the cups and balls that we sold. Anyhow, that's crazy. I still have that. That was 50 years ago. Oh my God. No, almost 50 years ago.
That's so cool. But that's such a cool story, Tom. I mean, we all get into magic by different ways, but your story is just so unique and so cool. And how from the moment that you got into magic, it extended until you guys got a magic shop together. It's just so cool.
It was crazy. Half the week I was working in a psychiatric hospital, and half the week I was working in a magic shop. And sometimes I would get confused. I'd be at the psychiatric hospital. I'd pick up the phone. I'd say, hello, the magic shop. And there'd be some crazy person on the other end of the phone thinking, whoa, this is just what I need. I don't know. It was anyhow, that's so how I got into magic. It's crazy.
Yeah. So what do you think it's so great about learning magic, or that idea of teaching versus learning magic? Why do you think that's so appealing?
I don't know. The first thing that popped into my head, Carlos, was I have thought, like, over the last year or two, I've just been amazed that I can have in my pocket a couple of coins and a stone and maybe a sponge ball and maybe even a deck of cards or something. And with those few silly little things, you can bring so much joy and happiness to people, and you can meet people, and it's just amazing.
Yeah, it's wonderful. I sometimes feel that, like, we really do have superpowers somehow.
I know people do. I mean, if you're a magician, people think of you differently. It's crazy. Yeah. It's wonderful.
It's crazy. And now, the way of learning has shifted so much, has changed. Most people consume and learn by video. And right now, the way that you learn magic is a little bit different from the way I learned. But now people are learning directly in video online. And you made that shift, meaning you created this a course called Become a Magician. So tell us a little bit about that.
Well, when the pandemic hit back in March here in the United States, my wife Janet and I had just gotten back from being on the U.S.-Mexico border. We were performing in El Paso, but mainly right across the border from El Paso in its kind of sister city, Juarez, in Mexico. And we did 12 shows for asylum seekers, about 2,000 folks we performed for. And it was really sad and wonderful. It was terrific performing for those folks. And we got back, and it was lockdown, and it was quarantine, and we were staying at home here in Vermont. And we had a bunch of shows scheduled, 30 shows, and they all got canceled. And we had 12 shows in the libraries in Albany, New York, all the different branches of the Albany Library. And they called and they said, would you like to do some virtual magic shows for the library? And I said, let me think about it. And I was very ignorant of all this Zoom business. And my show feels very personal and very interactive with the audience. And I just didn't know how it was going to work on Zoom. So about 2 days later, a friend of ours who helped create the scholarship fund that we have that can help some of our magic students go to school or get training or whatever, she called me, and she's now teaching really learning disabled kids. And she said, we're taking a break in the term and we'd like to end it in a special kind of way. And we wondered if you would do a show for the kids. And I had already done over the last couple of years shows for these very kids in person. So I said, I had a connection with them. I really admired and loved this teacher who called me. And I said, sure, Marie, I'll do it. So I did the show. It was like a 35, 40-minute show. Mm-hmm. The teachers loved it. The kids loved it. I hated it. I just couldn't feel connected to these little postage stamps on the Zoom screen. I just felt, this is not, So I contacted the libraries and I said, I don't want to do a magic show, but how about if we're thinking of creating a virtual magic course called Become a Magician? And it would be more than just teaching tricks. It would also be really teaching how to perform the tricks, teaching acting and storytelling and performance skills. So they seemed really interested in that. So Janet and I got to work, and we filmed this 2.5-hour course that begins with a little introduction. It has a 30-minute magic show that uses 8 of the 14 tricks that we teach. And then it's followed by a performance explanation of 14 tricks. And then we contacted you, and because we were so ignorant about technology things, and you took it and put it into this wonderful digital form and formatted it, and it's fantastic. And so we introduced it to 10 libraries who purchased it this past summer, and a professional theater company who teaches acting and playwriting and different things during the summer. They bought it, and it was really, really well received. And now we're thinking of other ways to get it out there, because I think it's really a pretty good thing. And it can really, really introduce people to magic. And what's great about it, we created it in quarantine. So we used only props that people have at home or they can buy for a few dollars in the local drugstore, like coins and cards and paper clips and rubber bands and paper and pencil and things like that for only so that's Become a Magician.
Cool, Tom. Pretty cool that you jumped into the virtual game with this. So for
teaching an old dog new tricks, as they say.
Exactly. So for everyone that's listening, you can go to learn.magicianswithoutborders.com, and you can have access to this for you, for yourself, and you can have, it's a self-paced video course, so you can go as fast or as slow as you can, as you want. It's wonderful. I think it's very thorough. And as you say, it's not just the tricks to learn them, but just how to perform them. And if you actually do the course, you can perform a 30-minute magic show when you're done with it. It's amazing, Tom. So,
and you can go to your local librarian and tell them to go on Magicians Without Borders, and get interested in it and purchase it and make it available to all the patrons of the library.
So we have another version for libraries. That's for all the patrons of libraries. We give them a personalized website for them so that all their patrons can access this course. So it's a pretty cool way to get online activities at your local library. So that's also a possibility right there. So Tom, awesome that you jumped into this virtual thing about.
Yeah, thank you for asking me about that. Yeah,
and magic. That's awesome. And well, I want to take this conversation on. We just talked about how you learn magic and how you're teaching magic online, and I just want to take this to. Do you remember when this guy that we're going to introduce right now came to us and I said, I want to go to Brazil and I want to go to teach magic in Brazil. Do you remember that moment? Do you remember how that happened?
I think my mind is going crazy, or I'm losing it or something, but I don't. I remember you introducing him to me, but he probably contacted me. I don't know. But he was a Fulbright scholar, so I imagine he may have gotten introduced to Magicians Without Borders from another wonderful Fulbright scholar who introduced me to you, Carlos.
So many connections. That's so cool. So many connections. So we're going to hear about from him in a second. But what are your thoughts, Tom, on encouraging somebody that says, hey, I want to go and, carry your flag out to a place called Uberlandia, or in Portuguese, it might be Uberlandia in Brazil?
I just think it's fantastic. One reason is there's some part of me, and it was inspired in many different ways that I can't go into right now. I wanted to go to Brazil and do Magicians Without Borders performances there in the favelas, and I've never been able to do that, or haven't done it yet. And then this young man wanted to go there and represent Magicians Without Borders. It was really, really terrific and wonderful. And I'm thrilled that we're going to have a conversation with him, and I can find out how he knew about Magicians Without Borders.
Yeah, I think we have it all mixed up with all the connections, and that is him. So that's
Kyle. Look at this. Handsome young magician.
Yes, and he's been doing magic for a while. So let's give him a welcome. So, hey, Kyle, welcome.
Hello.
How are you?
Well, hello there, Kyle.
Doing well. Thanks so much for having me. It's so exciting, and I felt like I was listening to Tom tell the story about how he got into magic, and I was just wanting to jump in and say that resonates, albeit way less an impressive magic career that I have, Tom. But
can you say what moments resonated?
I think for me, what you talked about, the superpower of like walking around with just a couple of things in your pocket and being able to just really carry that connection vehicle with you, where you can go anywhere and where you don't know anyone, you don't really have any reason for being there, and immediately just wow people, connect with people. Yeah. And the sort of accessibility of magic for me was immediately what got me into it.
Yeah, that's great.
Pretty cool.
I mean, so many moments on a street like in India. Two little, ragamuffins would come up to me, and they'd want like a couple of rupees, they'd be begging. I'd reach into my pocket, take out a rupee and put it in my hand and hand it to them, and it was gone. And what did you do? And then I'd pull it out of their ear and change it into a stone that I found on the ground. And I mean, it was just nothing, just these simple little things. And it created such a magic moment, I'm sure all of us have had that.
Oh yes, those moments are just wonderful. But do you remember how did you get into magic, Kyle? Do you remember that first moment of?
Yeah, I do. It sounds a lot, probably like a lot of kids' first moments in magic. But I was 10, I think, the same age as Tom, and I was actually at a sports camp with me, and it was my brothers and I have an older brother and a younger brother, and we were at this sports camp playing soccer and baseball and all different sports. And one of the counselors was doing tricks one day, was doing magic one day at lunch. And my two brothers didn't really they were like, oh, that's cool. And I was just immediately hooked and drawn in. And I think the trick that I first saw him do was the Out of This World red-black card trick. And I had seen magic, on TV before, and I'd seen it sort of, I remember my art teacher would do sort of a French drop, and I thought that was cool. But when I saw this card trick, I was like, that's impossible. I need to know how it's done. And I was immediately, the sports camp quickly became a magic camp for me those next couple of weeks.
So cool.
Yeah.
And did that counselor teach you some things?
He did. There was sort of a core group of us, like 2 or 3 of us, that after we demonstrated genuine interest and we went and started trying to create our own magic tricks before he was willing to teach us anything. So I remember one of the first tricks I learned was one that we invented ourselves. Was this: you took a bracelet and put it on your thumb, and then put it under your armpit, and then went back and grabbed it from behind your back. And it was like a Live Strong bracelet, like a rubber band bracelet. And we brought that trick to him, and he probably, he knew exactly how it was done and everything, but he was impressed enough that we had taken the time to learn something on our own. And he started, teaching us a few things in the next couple of weeks.
So cool. That's
it's
so
interesting. I was just looking at this magic catalog, and there is Out of This World, Paul Curry.
Oh, that's awesome.
It was one of our best-selling items. I just love teaching Paul Curry's Out of This World.
Oh, it's great. It's great.
It's an amazing card trick.
Yeah, we would chant red and black for him to do it every day.
So cool. So
Great.
cool. So cool, Kyle. So you learned magic at this magic camp, and then I'm assuming you kept it as a hobby for a couple of years?
Yeah, I kept it as a hobby, kind of on and off. I would say there were periods. I went through sort of a prank phase where I was really into doing pranks and less into magic, and then I gravitated back to magic, specifically card magic. And I would say still to this day, that's sort of the area of magic that I have the most experience in and really gravitated to. Partly, I think, because of the David Blaine Street Magic special was a big one for me. I actually ended up in high school. I wrote a paper about David Blaine's Street Magic special. Wow. But I actually went away. So I went to a boarding school when I was about 14 or 15. And so I lived in a dorm with all my friends, and there was, 15 to 18-year-olds in this dorm. And I had, for a couple years, not done much magic. And then I met somebody who lived on the second floor above me, who was South Korean. And he was an excellent magician and an excellent card magician specifically. And he and I would get together every night and kind of riff back and forth and practice magic together. And it was an awesome way for me as this tiny, 5'5" freshman who weighed about 100 pounds to when a senior walked into my room, demanding to see some magic, I could kind of break down those barriers. And
that's cool. Wow.
It was a cool way to connect with people, and we ended up there was a physics professor there, or a physics teacher in high school that we found, and we started the magic club in high school together, and so and then when that teacher ended up leaving, we took it over, and it was a chance to start teaching magic, and that was kind of my first foray at or attempt at teaching magic, and that was before I really knew enough to teach, but it was a good chance to see what that would be like.
There's an old saying: to teach is to learn twice. You know,
yes,
you really learn by teaching. It's amazing.
Yeah, it's great because you need to know it upside down and
break it down into all the pieces.
Totally.
And sometimes for granted, you have to really, really think about it.
Yeah, sometimes I think, oh, that's easy. I'll teach it, and then I'm like, how is this? How do I get this across? It's complicated. So, Kyle, I wanted to ask you how did this get tied up together? So you love magic, right? You like magic.
Yep.
You, as we discussed before, you got a Fulbright scholarship, but then you knew about Magicians Without Borders. So help us understand. How is all that tied together?
It's funny that Tom said his memory is clouded, because I think mine has become almost convoluted with all the different connections. But so if I start from the beginning, when I went to Middlebury College in Vermont, which is relatively close to where you're
very close,
based. And so when I was a senior at Middlebury, I applied for a Fulbright scholarship in Brazil. And the reason I did that was because I had spent a semester studying abroad in southern Brazil. And I came back from that semester super excited about Brazil, but feeling like I didn't have enough time there and I wanted to go back. So I applied for an English teaching assistant Fulbright scholarship in Brazil, which I was lucky enough to be granted. And then so in February of 2018, that was sort of when I was set to leave for Brazil. And I had this chunk of time between graduation and leaving for Brazil. And, what I found out about Fulbright is that beyond just English teaching, you have the opportunity to embark on a side project of your choosing. And so, you spend about 15 to 20 hours in the classroom each week teaching English. In Brazil, it's specifically at public universities as a TA. And then you can do, really anything that you're passionate about on the side as a project. You have people that might be interested in healthcare services, or people that want to study with like a local mechanic. It could be really anything. It runs the gamut. And I knew that I wanted to incorporate magic into my side project somehow. It just seemed like it would be a missed opportunity not to do that. And so I had remembered, and this is the part that is a little bit cloudy for me, but I had remembered sort of vaguely Magicians Without Borders. And it's probably, Tom, because of your proximity to Middlebury in some capacity, but I had remembered this organization. And I was like, that sounds like something similar to what I'm trying to do, right? I'm going beyond borders and I want to do magic. And so I did a quick search and I found Ryan Bart's TED Talk in Colombia. And so he did a TEDx talk about his experience doing exactly what I wanted to do in Brazil. And I was like, this is the guy that I needed to talk to. He is, had an amazing experience. He talked about you, Carlos. And I was like, I didn't know anyone. I hadn't talked to anyone at Magicians Without Borders, but I reached out on Facebook to Ryan and he got back to me almost immediately and we set up time to chat. And this was about, 3 months before I left for Brazil. And he was awesome. He connected me to Carlos, who connected with you, Tom, and you all were, super helpful. And I can't emphasize them enough, how much confidence and you all gave me to do what I had wanted to do. But it was kind of this idea, and by nature of being a side project, these things can kind of die out and people don't really follow through with them all the time. So it was something that I really appreciated having that kind of network of support and advice for to do something that I had I didn't really know how I was going to execute.
Okay, pretty cool. Pretty cool how that all ties together.
Yeah.
And yeah, you were gonna go to Uberlandia. How do you pronounce Uberlandia?
So in Portuguese, and Brazil's so big, so there's regional accents all over the place. But where I was in Minas Gerais, it's Uberlandia, and so the G is a G. Yeah, and Uberlandia was kind of a random choice. I mean, Brazil is as big as the continental U.S. and there are Fulbright scholars that are sent to almost 40 cities across Brazil, and there's a process. The placement process is relatively random. You can choose a couple of cities that you'd like to be placed, but at the end of the day, everyone chooses like Rio and Sao Paulo, and they have to send people all over the place. And so I ended up in Uberlandia, which is sort of a mid-sized city in the middle of Brazil. And it was very different from where I studied abroad, which I really loved, in that I studied in Florianopolis in the south, which was kind of this coastal, beautiful city, but a little bit more touristy. Didn't really have like a kind of singular identity to it. Whereas when I was in Uberlandia, these are people that grow up and have generations in the same city, and incredible food, diverse people, and it was a good size for me. I'm not a big New York City kind of Sao Paulo type person, so it was a great place for me, and I had an incredible experience there.
So cool. Here you were sharing some of the picture of your kids, and that was the Clube de Mágica. How do you say it?
Yeah, Clube de Mágica. So the magic club in Portuguese.
Yeah. So where are you now? So like the program is set up as you said, that we gave you guidance, and so
yep.
we suggested you get in touch with a local NGO. And how was that process, and where is this?
Yeah, definitely. So the two big pieces of advice that you and Ryan gave me were get in touch with a local organization, before you get down there, preferably. And then the second one was bring as many magic props as you can in your suitcase, which was great advice, and something that I just didn't consider how inaccessible some of the sort of core props would be. So I had an entire suitcase dedicated to coloring books and ball and vase and stiff ropes and all this different stuff, and it was the best thing I did, and I appreciate what you all did in helping me raise some money for that as well. But I connected. So what I did before I got to Uberlandia was I sent emails to like as many youth centers around the city that I could find. And I didn't hear back from a single one. And I was like, oh man, this is like, I had sort of drafted this whole letter, and I talked about Magicians Without Borders, sponsor it, because I wanted to give it a sense of being, credible and official. And so I had, this whole email drafted in Portuguese, and I was nervous, I was proofreading it the whole time. I sent it out, didn't get anything back. And so what I did when I arrived in Uberlandia, I found ONG Casa, so ONG Casa, and this is a youth center in Uberlandia that has a few locations around the city, and it serves generally disadvantaged youth across the city. And in Brazil, you're only in school for 3 or 4 hours a day in middle school and primary school, and so there's kids that either have nothing to do in the morning or nothing to do in the afternoon. And so ONG Casa sets up, a series of activities for these kids every day, from karate to capoeira to arts. And I found the address to ONG Casa, and I walked in completely unannounced. And I showed up to Tia Nadia's office, and she's the coordinator of, one of like the 3 or 4 locations of ONG Casa. And I just gave her my elevator pitch in my sort of broken, or, you know, at that stage, you know, relatively broken Portuguese. And I was, you know, just selling her on my idea. And I was expecting I was expecting this kind of like questions or, you know, kind of hesitancy, but she was just like, oh my gosh, like, you're telling me that you came to Brazil, you came to Uberlandia, and you chose like this place, and you want to help, you want to volunteer and do magic. And she was so happy and like extremely
So cool.
receptive. So I'm super grateful to Tia Nadia for just being like the perfect
Yay,
person
Tia
that I could have come across.
Oh, so cool, Kyle. I mean, I wanna, you know, what's the word? I mean, when I hear this, I am in awe, because it's you really took our program and just plowed through all you know, non-responses and bumps in the road, and say, hey, I want to do this. I want to do this. I'm gonna go there and stand there in front of her, and then, you know, make her listen to me, and you did, and without doing it before. And I think that's very, I don't know if the word is commendable or
commendable. Yeah,
so
perfect.
So freaking cool that you did that, man. So I just wanted to thank you, because it's, I mean, few people in my life I've crossed that have that, you know, a push and drive, and to do it in a country that is not your own, and when you are in a year abroad, you want to, you know, do all these things, but you end up choosing this. So like, Tia Nadia, I'm, you know, like, surprised, and I just wanted to congratulate you and say thank you once again, because it's just so cool, so unbelievable that you did that. And I want to go forward asking you, so what were your thoughts, you know, or your expectations versus the reality on your first few weeks of the program?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think one of the pieces of advice that Ryan gave me, which was really, really was extremely valuable, was, you know, make sure that you can find a group of students that stays constant, you know, throughout the time that you're there. And so my original sort of thought was, oh, I can go and sort of teach magic here to this group and teach magic here to this group. And I think one of the difficult parts is that there were like 100 kids at Ongi Casa, and, you know, of course, everybody wanted to be part of the Clube de Mágica, but I think that some of the best, you know, the best thing that you know, the best piece of advice that Ryan gave me, and something that I'm super glad I did, was, you know, with Tia Nadia's help, we found a group of 11 to 13-year-olds, which is sort of that age where you're kind of understand, you know, the concepts of magic and the discipline required to practice. And we started with 12, and, you know, there were, you know, 2 or 3 that were in and out, but we really did have a core of like 9 or 10 students that were coming every single week. And it was so different from teaching English to university students, and my expectations, I think I was doing it in Portuguese, you know, I was doing it in my second language. And so that like made it, you know, twice as difficult or 10 times as difficult. And so, you know, for my English students at the university there, I could basically plan a lesson, and, you know, these are college students that are showing up, and they're motivated to learn English, and I could follow the lesson plan to the T. And, you know, things might go off track a bit, but generally, like, I could, you know, have a plan and follow it. And I remember my first Clube de Mágica class, I showed up with probably like a 10-page almost script, but like every minute was planned out of what would happen, because I was nervous about the language. I was nervous about teaching magic. I wanted to make sure that, you know, I established a good impression with these kids, and I wanted to like establish sort of the wonder before and do a show in Portuguese. So I essentially had to relearn all these tricks that I knew in English in Portuguese. And it just, like, nothing went according to plan, right? It was like and that was the case for the first several weeks. And it was important that I had a framework and a plan. And I would definitely recommend anyone that does this to be, come prepared and think through sort of, how you want to structure the time. But, when you're working with kids, like they're bringing their personalities. They're, if they had a bad day, they might be like, slouched on the, in their chair. They might be bouncing off the walls if they just, had some cake and, after lunch for someone's birthday. And like, that was like, I think the biggest difference between expectations and reality. I was like, okay, I need to adapt and be, and just, change gears when I need to, make sure these kids are like first and foremost, having a great time and love coming to the Clube de Magica every week. And sometimes, just because I had planned to teach them ball and vase this week, and riffle force, maybe that's not gonna happen this week, and we're gonna have to kind of pull an audible here a little bit. So that was a big lesson for me, for sure.
Good. Yeah, that's so good to hear, because it's challenging, and even though it's pretty cool, it's also pretty challenging sometimes. And I wanted to ask you, do you know if the kids were familiar with magic before? How familiar were they with magic?
Not too familiar. There's a famous TV show in Brazil called Mr. M, Mr. Emmy. And this is and he's the guy that goes on and like wears a mask and reveals magic. And so that was a few of them had, understood magic in the context of Mr. M. There was one of my students, Ivan, was extremely adept at handling cards because he had played a lot of truco, which is the most common card game, played outside bars and on, all over Brazil. And so he had clearly I could just tell when he held a deck of cards and he started dealing cards. I was like, okay, he definitely has, despite not knowing magic, he was like miles ahead when it came to cards. And then Lucas, another student, could do a couple of tricks with a pen where, and you all have seen this, but you like shove it up your nose and then you take it out. And so he did that. And I was like, and that was cool, because for me, that was like, wow, I want to know how to do that, Lucas. Like teaching this kid was 12 years old. And so that was cool. But besides that, they almost had no exposure to magic at all.
Okay. Yeah, that's pretty interesting. Because we've had, all different experiences, and some kids are like, no, this is the devil, I'm not doing this. Or the kids are like, yeah, no, we're not have anything to do with it. But how big Mr. M is in Brazil, it maybe work to our advantage. They know that it's
definitely
superpowered. But what we always try to encourage is, finding a local magicians, because in most places, local magicians are people that have free time, that are willing to go and share what they've learned and are doing okay. But it was very hard for you to find that in Uberlandia, right? So I just wanted you to talk about that, because I thought that was very particular for your from your experience. So I would love to hear about that. And here's a picture of I don't know if it's the only magician, but one of the only magicians in Uberlandia.
Yeah, definitely. And definitely credit to you, Carlos, for helping me connect with the magic network across Brazil. And I know there are some, Bernardo Sedlacek, and there are some other, prominent magicians in Rio and Sao Paulo, but Magic Mark is a great guy, a really excellent magician. And we connected, I think we got like acai on for our first kind of encounter. He picked me up in his truck and we went and got acai, and we talked for, a couple of hours. He had some magic props on him. We did a little bit of magic. We chatted about what I was doing about, he's this extremely humble guy that has, that works full time, probably 50, 60 hours a week at a Coca-Cola plant in Uberlandia. And on the side, he's probably doing, 20 hours of magic a week of shows. And he was like so gracious and so, and a really impressive magician. And like you said, one of the only ones in Uberlandia. He would partner up with a clown, and they would, do a show at the circus. He would do a lot of birthday parties, weddings, and other events. And so when I found him, the struggle was that at his time is so constrained, and that he didn't have, a lot of the times that I was spending at Ongi Casa was either, in the mid morning or afternoon. And I was able to, luckily, there's a
in about 10 minutes.
Luckily there's a, pretty significant holiday period in Brazil. And so I was able to, a couple weeks after I met him, get him to come into the class, and perform and teach some magic to the Clube de Magica. And that was really cool because like, he just has this really professional aura about him, and the way that he speaks about magic and why he loves magic and his storytelling is unbelievable. That like, it was such a good example for these kids to see, like, because they basically, their exposure to magic was like Mr. Emmy and then me. And like, that's like such a small sample size of what magic is. And so for them to see Magic Mark, and he came in and one time he brought his daughter, who's 9 years old, and is also performing with him. And for these kids to see, who are 11 and 12, to see this girl that is younger than them, performing at a high level with her father, that was amazing. And Magic Mark was just like extremely gracious. He came in several times to meet the kids and perform. I think, the struggle was, he wasn't going to be someone he wanted to do magic full time. That's his ultimate dream, but it's just been so difficult in Brazil, given the economic situation, that he didn't have like the time to dedicate to his real passion.
Yeah, but I think that was all so wonderful to find a magician in Uberlandia.
Totally.
And connecting.
Like a needle in a haystack.
Yeah, exactly. That was so cool, because for our program, it's so important for kids to have, as you said, a bigger sample size of magicians, and not just what they've seen on TV or the guy that's there, teaching. And you actually brought the kids all the way from knowing nothing about magic to over here doing a public performance, or you did multiple performances with the kids. But I just wanted to ask you, do you have any, if you want to share some high points or low points, or very challenging things that you overcame with the kids,
definitely,
from the start to doing this public show for a lot of people.
Yeah. We did a couple of shows. Actually, that picture is the Mother's Day show, which was only about 10 weeks or so into the program, and was the biggest show that we did. There was 300 people there.
Wow.
And I was like, I was completely shocked, first of all, at how many people were there. And it was also so early on, but I think it was great to have a show at that point, because it gave us just enough time to get ready, but it also was something that just motivated them, like right from the start. It was like, hey guys, like, we're going to, we took the magician's oath. They created this sort of whole, like, we are the Clube de Magica, like, we're here together, and we are going to, like, in 10 weeks, we have a show in front of your parents, and it is going to like blow everyone's mind. And they were like, we were like the finale of the show after the karate and the dance and the capoeira, and the kids were just like so pumped and so nervous for the show. And I was so nervous for the show because I've never performed in front of that many people in my life. And that was like definitely a high point And a later show, I brought some of my friends from the university, which was really cool because they were like, they saw these like, oh, these cool guys from the university who Kyle plays rugby with and who he studies with. And like, you know, these. And so that was another high point. But the Mother's Day show, like them backstage, like getting so nervous and their stomachs were, you know, had butterflies in it, they were telling me. And then after they performed, it was like this, like that kind of rush of adrenaline that you know, you both have gotten after a show, but they like got to feel that. And it really motivated them to, and they saw how all the kids that weren't in the Klubi Magica were like envious of this sort of thing that they were a part of. So it made the whole thing sort of cooler and more real for them.
They were like rock stars.
Yeah, exactly. So that was, and I was like, oh my, I was so nervous too. I mean, that was like so many people. You couldn't really see the lights were so bright, as you can see in that picture. You couldn't really see anyone. And it was like and we had to basically, we took these illusions that are meant for like, you know, maybe a 10-person audience and blew them up to like, so we made this, you know, we did one card trick with a massive prediction, and we made this like 10 by 10 sign of the 7 of diamonds, and like them revealing it was just like the best moment ever.
Carlos and I have talked about how that kind of performing can make you think like in such a theatrical, dramatic, big kind of way, you know. It can really improve your magic, you know. Totally.
Yeah, it definitely improved my magic. I hadn't, you know, I'd done mostly like close-up card tricks with small groups of people, and I, you know, had to relearn a lot of the classic illusions, you know, that I did when I was a young kid, and then I had to relearn them again in a different language. And I think doing them in a different language makes the storytelling aspect so much more important, because when you're speaking your first language, you can kind of fill in the blanks and kind of like ad lib things, but not really have a coherent story. But when I, you know, doing it in Portuguese, I really needed to think through like the narrative and what was compelling or not compelling about that narrative, and kind of rework things. So that was definitely interesting and valuable for me as a magician as well.
That's interesting. Today, on Wednesdays, I teach this little guy magic. I've been teaching him for about 1.5 years, and he has autism, and he's very, you know, kind of shy with people and connecting and stuff. And we were talking about, he did this story with the coloring book. And then he went on and on and on and on. Once he got going, he got kind of carried away. And we talked about kind of more is less, and actually writing a script. So we worked on writing a script for the coloring book today, which, you know, is so important, you know.
That is so cool. Yeah, I was always so surprised and impressed with these stories that, like, I remember the ball and vase, Thiago was one of the kind of like most passionate students who would go home and learn tricks on his own and bring them back to class. And he came up with this like this just elaborate plot that was essentially him getting, you know, he was the ball in the vase, and he got in trouble with his parents and had to go home, and then they didn't let him out of the house, and he snuck out of the house, and he went to school, and like it was like this whole elaborate plot, and like he was at the center of it all, and it was just so awesome.
We were talking about 5 weeks ago with a wonderful New York magician, Michael Muldoon. His name is Six, because he has 6 fingers.
Wow.
It's really wild. His tagline is magic with an extra touch. I mean, his mother gave him the choice to cut off that appendage when, you know, she left it on there and he decided to keep it. But he told the story of this young Salvadoran boy, William, who did the ball in vase, and it was a yellow ball in vase with a red ball inside of it. And he had a very, very tragic life story, and his mom committed suicide when he was only 6 years old, and it was awful. And that ball in vase, he did a performance once. He took the ball and put it in his pocket, and he showed it. The ball was not there. And he told this story about this little boy who had lived this tragic life, and he lost his heart, you know. But when he learned to do magic, he got his heart back. And he said, I know that's true because I am that little boy. And here my heart came back and the ball was in. It was unbelievable. You know,
So
took
cool.
this little $1.50 trick and turned it into this extraordinary
That's
piece
amazing.
of magic. It was so that's wonderful to hear your student going home and working on something and creating a story, and it's beautiful.
So cool. Yes.
Ah.
So Kyle, you've told us about your story. You spent a year in Brazil in Uberlandia. I wanted to ask you two questions to end this. What do you think are the main takeaways of that 1 year experience that you still carry with you today?
That's a great question. Yeah, I think it goes back to something that we were talking about earlier, but the sort of risk that I took to walk in to a place that I didn't know anything about. I didn't know anyone. And this is like something that I expressed. It hit me when at the graduation with these kids, you know, the Clube de Mágica kind of formal, we presented, you know, certificates and they became kind of official teachers of magic for the younger kids. And it hit me there. I was like, you know, I showed up here and I didn't know any of you. I didn't know anybody else in this city. And just the risk that I took to go outside of my comfort zone and do something that I didn't know really would be possible or not, I think has stuck with me and is like a lesson in taking risks and putting yourself out there, because, you know, nothing that you know, the Clube de Mágica would not have existed had I not just been willing to, you know, I could have easily not gotten an email reply and just given up, or you know, gone and spent my weeks, you know, traveling and doing different things. But for me, that sort of initiative and willingness to fail sometimes and not, and also, you know, when things went off track towards the beginning, or, you know, my students showed up and they're having a bad day and it was exhausting and discouraging, just like the risk that I took to create something and stick with it. That's something that I've carried with me and is something that I hope I never lose, and I think will you know, certainly stay with me in any context.
Awesome. I think
That's
that's a
wonderful.
great description. Yes, and to finish, you know, when you spend a year abroad, you have many experiences, right? The part of teaching the kids our program of Magicians Without Borders, where do you think it ranks on your year that you spent there?
Oh, at the very top, definitely. I mean, I say this all the time, and like that, the Clube de Mágica for me was, it started as a side project, but it became like the project for me in Brazil, and it was so central to my experience and by far the most meaningful part of my experience, because it took like I applied for Fulbright as like a way as a means to get back to Brazil, and I wanted to live in Brazil. I was interested in education, but I was like, mainly I didn't know whether I wanted to be a teacher, but I wanted to be back in Brazil. And the Clube de Mágica and Magicians Without Borders, like, it combined everything into this like one like perfect storm. I had my passion for magic, my passion for language, and connecting with people, like the joy that I get from working with kids, and
teaching,
all of that stuff like came together, that it became like the thing for me. So it was like always what fired me up to get up in the morning in Brazil, and to still, have those connections and be able to communicate on WhatsApp with these kids, and just know that, like, I left an impact in Brazil, but also like the impact that they left on me, was incredible. And so that it's at the top for sure for me.
We're going to be talking with Ryan Bart, and I'm not certain, but I'm pretty sure that he would say the same thing about his Fulbright year in
probably.
Bogota.
Totally.
Yeah,
I think it's like, I mean, if you create something, and Ryan, he said the same thing to me, like when I started, is, it was something that he created and felt accountable for and proud of. And that like meant so much. And, I love, teaching and doing some of the other things I was doing, teaching English and doing some of the other things I was doing in Brazil, but that was sort of infrastructure that was set up before I got there, and I was just kind of plugging in and then plugging out. Whereas like the magic and Magicians Without Borders, the Magic Club down there, was for me like something that I created, and how, what it was because of what I and these kids were going to create together. So I think that was like, just made it so much more special for me.
I'm so glad you did that for us and for you. It's just so wonderful.
It's wonderful. It was wonderful to hear you, to have you here, Kyle. Thank you so much for, taking that leap and seeing it through. It was wonderful having you here. Anything else you want to ask, Tom?
Yeah, just I hope our paths cross physically in this.
I know. I hope we can get down to Brazil, all three of us.
Oh my God in Himmel, that would be fantastic.
That would be amazing.
And if you're ever up here in Vermont, please, you always have a place. And if I come to Boston, I'll be in touch.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I would love to connect with both of you. I feel like we've connected only virtually, and it's due time that that we get together and make some magic.
Okay.
Yes.
We will do that.
Yeah, definitely. We'll have to plan a trip to Brazil. That would be amazing. Ooh. So thank you, Kyle. This was amazing. Thank you for being here. Thank you for your time, Tom. As always, it was lovely to have you here. And
wonderful.
We'll see everybody next week.
Okay.
Great.
Stay safe.
Thank you so much for having me.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye, guys.